Sexual violence has been one of the many features of the war on Tigray, with women and girls being subjected to horrific acts of sexual violence that included rape, gang rape, sexual slavery, and torture. We met with a 16-year-old survivor in the town of Adigrat. She's just one of thousands to be displaced from Dansha in western Tigray. She was just grade 8 student when the war erupted, exposing her and many others in the small town of Dansha to unspeakable violence.
بعلت إسرائيل شو عدينا وكذا أتيو إسرائيل شيء أتيو بزح كفعتات فتم مملنا أو جذاب متع نتيفات زرع أين ورن أبوي أين ورن أو جذاب.
They first came to our house and asked where my father was. I was with a friend of mine. She was 15 years old. I told them he was out on the field collecting sesame. They didn't believe me. They said he was supporting Wayana. Then they raped both of us. There was 5 of them. They were members of Amhara Special Forces and Fano.
She says they later killed her friend. They said she was not a virgin and said she had given up her virginity to a junta.
نجنتا دي خيبكي دنجل نخرت نجنتا دي خيبكي ما أتيلو ما مسايمت نارت.
5 of them raped us. They said I was a virgin, but that she wasn't. They killed her for that. They said she'd lost her virginity to junta.
Weeks later, on November 28, Amhara forces would announce that all residents of the town would need to leave the area. They said they had to cross the Takaza River to the east of Tigray and would be killed if they didn't.
كاو أبرم سهدي دمنا أو تكذا بزا أي مكينة أو بيفهم تكذا ملاش عدهم يموتوا دحاني ملكتنا.
They made us leave on November 28th. A truck drove us to the banks of Takaza River. They told us they didn't care if we die or live once we crossed the river. But before we could leave, they took the men that were with us, killed them, and then dumped them into Takaza River. They accused them of being combatants. They just saw how tall they were and their physique and concluded that they were supporters of Wayana. They killed so many, but we got to continue our journey.
The survivor says the hardship would not end there. After crossing the river, they would travel to the town of Dedevit, a town in northwestern Tigray that had at that point of the conflict been completely abandoned due to heavy shelling by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. There, the survivor and 14 other women would fall into the hands of Ethiopian forces that would rape them for days.
Everyone had left the town. It was completely abandoned. We went to the rural area to find help. There, Ethiopian troops found us. There was 15 of us. They had separated us from the men. Till this day, we don't know what happened to them, if they killed them or if they're still alive. But we saw them beating them. They took us to their camp. They tied us onto a tree outside. And then they took turn raping us. They kept us like that for more than a week. The whole time, they gave us a single biscuit and water using the lid of a bottle. When fighting erupted, they left the area and left us there. Farmers found us tied to the tree and took us to their home.
The survivor tells us her and other victims were left incontinent and bleeding for days. They would be in and out of consciousness, unable to care for themselves.
We couldn't control our urine or the bleeding at the time. They took care of us for some days, but then they would have to leave their homes in the daytime to hide from the troops. So they'd lock us inside their house before they left.
The survivor tells us the farmers would care for her and other women for weeks, but then realizing that they needed medical attention, they would use cart to take them to another town called Maihansa. There, with the help of residents and other displaced persons, they would go to Shire, the capital of northwestern Tigray. But even there, they wouldn't be able to find any medical assistance. Weeks later, one of the survivors would die trying to terminate her pregnancy using traditional medication.
The women who were here with me were getting traditional medication to terminate their pregnancies. One of them took the medication and died. I think she overdosed. After seeing that, we thought we might be next if we do that, so we stopped.
The systematic destruction of more than 80% of Tigray's health facilities has further exasperated the condition of survivors in Tigray, many of whom have not only faced excruciating acts of sexual violence, but will have not received the appropriate care since. The survivor tells us that when she finally arrived in Adigrat, she was able to find a hidden one-stop center where medical professionals would give medical treatment to survivors of sexual violence. But she says the professionals had kept the place hidden, afraid of what would unfold if soldiers were to find out of the care that was being given at the facility.
There was a hidden one-stop center there, so we went there. They told me that it was too late to terminate the pregnancy, that it was dangerous for my health, and that they are unable to do anything. I was already more than 6 months pregnant. A pregnant mother isn't supposed to bleed for 9 months, but I bleed for 9 months straight. I was also unable to control my urine. I gave birth. I gave birth from an enemy.
The survivor tells us she is still unable to get the medical attention that is needed, both physical and psychological, due to the ongoing siege. But she asks that the world intervenes and do what it can to support survivors of sexual violence.
The world needs to give attention to survivors. We're losing mothers and patients with chronic illnesses due to lack of medication.
The situation of survivors of sexual violence in Tigray is as dire as it has ever been, where many, even more than a year later, are not able to get the medical treatment they so badly need.